The Baltimore Convention Center was a maze of security checkpoints, media credentials, and carefully orchestrated political theater. It was May 1984, and President Reagan was scheduled to speak at the National Small Business Association Conference. 1,500 entrepreneurs eager to hear about tax cuts and deregulation, but Reagan was restless. He'd been president for 3.5 years, and the bubble of protection around him had grown so thick he sometimes felt like he was suffocating. Every interaction was scripted, every handshake vetted, every meal prepared by White House chefs. Who knew his preferences down to how many ice cubes he liked in his water? "I haven't bought my own lunch in 4 years," he'd complained to Nancy that morning. "I don't even remember what it feels like to stand in line, order food, pay with my own money." Nancy had laughed, but she'd seen the wistfulness in his eyes. The presidency aged men not just through its pressures, but through its isolation. Now, backstage at the convention center, Reagan made a decision that would have given his Secret Service detail heart attacks if they'd known what he was planning. "Mike," he said to Agent Michael Larkin, his most trusted protector, "I need to use the restroom." "Of course, Mr. President, we'll clear the—" "No," Reagan interrupted. "Just give me minutes. I know where it is." Before Larkin could protest, Reagan was moving. But instead of heading to the restroom, he ducked into a service corridor he'd noticed on the building blueprints. Reagan always studied blueprints, a habit from his SAG days when he'd learned every exit in case of emergencies. He pulled off his suit jacket, loosened his tie, and grabbed a Baltimore Orioles cap from a maintenance cart. Looking in a dusty mirror, he barely recognized himself. Without the jacket, without the presidential posture, he could almost pass for any 73-year-old grandfather. The service corridor led to the convention center's public areas, where vendors had set up booths. The aroma hit him first, real food, not the carefully balanced meals his nutritionist approved. Hot dogs, pizza, and from a corner booth, the smell of grilled onions and fresh bread. "Sal's Famous Subs," the sign read. A hand-painted banner. Below added, "Family owned since 1963. Reagan approached the booth, his heart racing like a teenager sneaking out past curfew. There was a line, actual people, waiting for food, checking their watches, living their real lives. He joined it, pulling the cap lower. Behind the counter, 2 young employees worked with practiced efficiency. They looked like college kids. A girl with dark curly hair and tired eyes, a boy with an Eagles jersey under his apron. Their name tags read Maria and Kevin. Reagan was 3 people from the front when he heard their conversation. "I'm telling you, Maria, I can't do another double shift," Kevin was saying as he sliced tomatoes. "My mom needs help with the medical bills, but I've got finals next week." "At least you're still in school," Maria replied, spreading mayo with sharp, angry strokes. "I had to drop out last semester. Couldn't afford it even with 2 jobs." "You'll go back," Kevin said, but even Reagan could hear the hollow optimism. "With what money? You know what kills me?" Maria's voice dropped, but Reagan could still hear. "He's speaking right there, behind those curtains. The president. Talking about how great the economy is, how America's back. Maybe for some people, not for us." Kevin glanced around nervously. "Keep your voice down. Why? You think he cares what sandwich makers think? You think he's ever worked a double shift? Ever had to choose between textbooks and groceries? My dad says Reagan's policies will help eventually. Trickle down or whatever," Maria snorted. "Yeah? How long we supposed to wait for that trickle?" "I'm drowning now." Reagan stood frozen. The woman in front of him was ordering, but he couldn't move, couldn't breathe. These kids, they were his own children had been when he'd entered politics. They were working hard, playing by the rules, and they were drowning. "Next." Reagan stepped forward, his head down. "What can I get you?" Maria asked, not looking up from her prep station. ... Reagan's almost betrayed him. He pitched it lower. added a slight Baltimore accent he'd learned for a movie role decades ago. "What do you recommend?" Now Maria looked up, and for a heart-stopping moment, Reagan thought she'd recognized him. But she just looked tired. "The Italian's our bestseller. But honestly," she leaned forward conspiratorially, "the meatball sub's what I'd eat if I could afford to eat here. Times that tough?" Reagan asked softly. Maria studied him, an old man in an Orioles cap showing genuine interest. "Yeah, Pops. Times are that tough, but hey, at least I got a job, right? That's what they tell us to be grateful for. Never mind it doesn't pay enough to live." "2 jobs, you said?" "This one days, cleaning offices at night. Living the American dream, 60 hours a week and still can't afford community college." Kevin shot her a warning look, but she was past caring. "I'll take the meatball sub," Reagan said, "extra sauce." As Maria prepared his sandwich, Kevin worked beside her, and their conversation continued. "You apply for those scholarships I told you about?" Kevin asked. "All of them. Rejected. My grades slipped when I was working nights. They don't care why your GPA dropped, just that it did." "The system's broken," Kevin muttered. "No," Maria said, wrapping Reagan's sandwich with unnecessary force. "It's working exactly how it's designed to work. Keep people like us too tired and poor to climb out." She handed Reagan his sandwich. "That'll be $4.50. Reagan pulled out his wallet. He'd made sure to bring cash. Small bills like regular people carried. As he handed her a 5, their eyes met again. "Keep the change," he said. "Thanks, Pops. Every bit helps." Reagan took his sandwich to a small standing table where he could still hear them. He unwrapped it slowly, his hands shaking. The sandwich was perfect. Fresh bread, savory meatballs, just enough sauce. It tasted like America should taste. Honest, substantial, made by people who cared about their work even when the work didn't care about them. "I'm scared, Kev," Maria was saying during a brief lull in customers. "What if this is it? What if this is as good as it gets for people like us?" "Don't talk like that. My parents came here from Puerto Rico with nothing. Worked their whole lives believing their kids would do better. And here I am, 22 years old, making sandwiches and cleaning toilets. I'm letting them down." "You're not letting anyone down," Kevin said firmly. "You're surviving. That's heroic these days." "I don't want to be heroic," Maria's voice cracked. "I want to be a teacher, remember? I was going to teach history, show kids that people like. U.S. matter too. Now I can't even afford to finish the degree." Reagan couldn't eat anymore. The sandwich that had tasted so good now felt like sawdust in his mouth. These weren't statistics. These weren't policy papers. These were his children, America's children. And they were losing hope. He stood up, walked back to the counter. The line had died down. Was everything okay? Maria asked, noticing his half-eaten sandwich. "It was perfect," Reagan said. I wanted to ask you something. If someone could change things, make it easier for kids like you to get through school, what would that look like?" Maria laughed, but not unkindly. "You running for office, Pops?" "Just curious." She leaned on the counter, really thinking about it. "Make it so working doesn't punish you. I lost my financial aid because I made too much at my jobs. Too much, I was barely surviving. Make it so you can work and learn without having to choose. And healthcare," Kevin added, surprising them both. "My mom's insulin costs more than our rent." "That's insane." "Interest rates on student loans," Maria continued, warming to the topic. "They're criminal. We're not asking for handouts. We're asking for a chance to pay our way without drowning in debt before we even start." "You know what really gets me?" Kevin said. "They tell us we're the future of America, then they price us out of that future." Reagan's security detail would be looking for him now. He had minutes, maybe less. "Thank you," he said, meaning it more. "Then they could know, both of you, for the sandwich and And the education. He turned to go, then turned back. Don't give up. Either of you. Sometimes the people in charge need to be reminded what it's like down here. Sometimes they need to buy their own sandwich to remember. He left before they could respond, moving quickly back through the service corridor. He made it to the restroom just as Agent Larkin was about to raise an alarm. "Mr. President, are you all right? You were gone." "I'm fine, Mike. Better than fine. I need to make some changes to my speech." "Sir?" "Cancel the prepared remarks. I'm going to speak from the heart today." 30 minutes later, Reagan took the stage. The entrepreneurs applauded, expecting the usual tax cuts, deregulation, morning in America. Instead, they got something else. "I just bought a sandwich," Reagan began, and the audience laughed, thinking it was one of his folksy jokes. "No, really. First time in 4 years I've stood in line, ordered lunch, paid with my own money." The young woman who made it was named Maria. She's working 2 jobs and still can't afford to finish college. The laughter died. The young man working with her, Kevin, his mother can't afford insulin. He's choosing between his education and her medication. They're not looking for handouts. They're working harder than most of us in this room ever have. And they're drowning. The speech that followed wasn't what his staff had written. It wasn't what the Small Business Association expected. It was Reagan at his most human, talking about the gap between policy and people, between statistics and sandwiches. "We talk about trickle-down economics," he said. But Maria asked how long she's supposed to wait for that trickle while she's drowning now. I didn't have a good answer, because she's right. We can't ask people to have faith in future prosperity while they can't afford present necessities. He announced on the spot initiatives his staff would scramble to create: a new student aid program that wouldn't penalize working students, healthcare cost controls, interest rate caps on student loans. "I've spent 3.5 years in a bubble," Reagan admitted. "Today, a sandwich made by a young woman who's lost hope in the American dream reminded me why I ran for this office. Not to comfort the comfortable, but to make sure kids like Maria and Kevin get their shot." The audience was silent. Then slowly, applause began. Not the polite applause of political theater, but something real. Backstage, Reagan's chief of staff was apoplectic. "Mr. President, these initiatives haven't been vetted. The budget implications. Then we'll find the money," Reagan said simply. "We spend billions on defense to protect the American dream. Maybe we should spend some protecting the Americans who are trying to live it." 3 weeks later, the Working Student Initiative was announced. It wasn't perfect. Politics never is, but it helped. Financial aid formulas were adjusted to not penalize working students. Student loan interest rates were capped. Healthcare reforms began, slowly, to address the insulin crisis Kevin's mother faced. But the real change was smaller and larger than policy. Reagan insisted on regular sandwich runs, unscripted interactions with real Americans. Security hated it. Staff resisted it. But Reagan persisted. "I need to remember," he'd say. "I need to see." Maria found out who her pops had been when a White House aide tracked her down. She was invited to the State of the Union address in 1985, where Reagan told her story to the nation. "This is Maria Rodriguez," he said as she stood, tears streaming down her face. "Last year, she made me a sandwich and taught me more about economics than any advisor ever has. Today, she's back in school, studying to be a teacher. Because we remembered that the economy isn't about numbers. It's about people like Maria." She graduated in 1987. Reagan spoke at her commencement, telling the graduates about a sandwich that changed his presidency. Kevin finished his degree too, went to medical school, became a doctor specializing in diabetes treatment. At his white coat ceremony, he thought about the president who'd bought a sandwich and listened. Years later, when Reagan's Alzheimer's had progressed, Nancy would sometimes take him to small diners, hoping to spark memory. One day in a Baltimore sandwich shop, he suddenly said clearly, "Maria made the meatballs. Extra sauce." She was drowning. "Yes," Nancy said, holding his hand. "But you threw her a lifeline." "Did I?" Reagan asked, genuinely uncertain. "I hope I did." Everyone deserves their sandwich. It didn't make sense to anyone but Nancy, who knew the story. How a president sneaking out for lunch had been reminded that leadership isn't about grand theories, but about understanding that behind every statistic is a Maria or a Kevin, working hard, playing by the rules, and needing someone in power to remember they exist. Today, there's a scholarship at the University of Baltimore, the Maria Rodriguez Teaching Fellowship. It's for working students who want to become teachers. The funding comes from an anonymous donor, but Maria knows who it is. She keeps a photo in her classroom. An old man in an Orioles cap, buying a sandwich, listening. And in the Oval Office. Every president since Reagan has found the same note in the desk drawer, left by their predecessor. Remember to buy your own sandwich sometimes. The people serving it have more to teach you than you know. That's the power of stepping out of the bubble, of listening to the people who make the sandwiches and clean the offices and keep America running while hoping for their own chance to rise. Sometimes the most important presidential moments happen not at podiums, but at sandwich counters, where leaders are reminded that every policy has a face, every statistic has a story, and every American deserves to be heard. Reagan's secret sandwich. Run lasted 15 minutes. Its impact lasted lifetimes. Because he didn't just hear two staff members talking. He heard America talking, and for once, he listened. That's leadership. That's humanity. That's what happens when power remembers to be humble enough to stand in line, order lunch, and realize that the people serving you might be drowning in the very prosperity you're celebrating. One sandwich, two young workers, a president who remembered to listen, and a country that was better for it.